Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest co-founded and led two high-growth technology companies that were featured in the Inc. 500 list of the fastest-growing companies. By all accounts, he was living the good life, but when he felt a calling to play an active role in creating a consciousness movement that could help people across the globe awaken to their deeper self and the interconnectedness and oneness of everything in the universe, he followed his heart and left the American dream behind. He is the co-founder of Humanity's Team along with Neil Donald Walsh and is a member of the Evolutionary Leadership Council. He is the author of A New Universal Dream, My Journey from Silicon Valley to a Life in Service to Humanity. Welcome to the show, Steve Farrell.
Matt, hey, thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here and really looking forward to jumping in and just getting into lots of juicy topics here.
Yeah, well, those titles, Evolutionary Leadership Council, your work, it sounds super fascinating. I love the title of everything. I love the intention of everything that you're doing. It sounds so big. It sounds so grand. So why don't we just start a little bit about your background, your work and your transition and everything you're working on now?
You bet. Well, so today I'm coming in live from Boulder, Colorado. This is where my family and Humanity's Team are based. I've been here since 2007. My book, A New Universal Dream, it's a true story. It starts with me at age 12, and we're a single mom, divorced, little home, 6 brothers and sisters. Probably a lot of us grew up that way. And then rather unlikely, as I finished college there in the Washington, D.C. area where I lived, I move out to San Francisco, didn't know anybody, and 11 years later, find myself at the center of wealth creation. I was just happened to be in the right place at the right time there in Silicon Valley to launch 2 digital technology companies. It just, again, started 2 guys, used furniture, the cheapest executive suite we could find, just hoping, crossing fingers, hoping that we could make it. And bam, boy, again, the internet started in 1992. We start that first company in 1990, and we go to 75 million in revenue there in 10 years. And then we birthed a second company inside of that that we took to 75 million in 2 years. So that's what gave me entrance into that whole, what I call center of wealth creation in Silicon Valley, where I got to hang out with some really, cool, bright people like Gavin Newsom, who's now the governor of California, and other people like him that were in my business chapter there. Now, in the midst of that, I was called, as you mentioned in your introduction, I was called to something that was much more important, and really the reason I think I was born into the world. It wasn't to go out and start companies and make a bunch of money. And incidentally, that American dream is not what people think it is. It's not. It's more of this oasis that's out there on the horizon. We've all seen that cartoon, and you walk toward it, and then you get to the oasis, except that it's a mirage, it moved out again, So there's always this next goal of 75 million, 150 million, 300 million. You're always walking toward this new objective. And meanwhile, what's not so funny is there's a lot of pressure on your personal relationships as you're feeding that machine, that growth of your company, top line and bottom line. And so on your partnership with your partner, your kids, your coworkers, friends, there's pressure, on those relationships. So that was another reason, as I got to do that whole private jet, private ski resort, that whole thing, and see it for what it really was. And I realized, wow, I wish the whole world could see what I'm seeing, because we wouldn't be shooting anymore for fame, and power and fortune. We'd head in another direction. And that's what I was called to there. I was called to leave to what we call in Humanity's Team, this nonprofit that I co-founded, as you mentioned, with Neil Donald Walsh. We co-founded it 20 years ago. And conscious living does bring us to that whole treasure, that invitation in life. I call it the delicious life. That we wanted. It's quite different than this whole American dream thing. And the good news is we can live anywhere in any spot in the whole world, and we can live consciously, and we can come into that treasure that truly, that real prosperity, abundant living, deliciousness in life from any place on the planet. So, and not only that, but when we do this together, we create this journey to a sustainable and flourishing planet. And of course, everybody on the planet these days is concerned about the future. Our kids and future generations, as extreme weather is getting worse and so on. This conscious living thing is a remedy. This is a very potent remedy that remedy because it heals all of that. The individual stuff, isolation, anxiety, depression, the collective stuff, starting wars, being in polarity with others. As I mentioned, extreme weather and global warming. You just can't do any of those things when we're conscious and when we see what science is affirming is true, which is that there's this universal consciousness that animates and permeates all of life in the universe, physical and non-physical. And when we see that and start living into it, don't just understand it, but really start living into it, then all of these beautiful things open up, which I know you enjoy, Matt. Probably a lot of your listeners enjoy, and it's what we're spreading the invitation to people all over the world. Hey, let's live this way. There's no better way to live, and when we do it together, we create a whole new future for the planet.
Wow. Well, that's an amazing story. And I've heard that time and time again. I think it's about, living the American dream or, getting to the mountaintop in the materialism world. And it's not exactly as you thought it was. Now, when maybe you haven't made it there, you're thinking, okay, that's great, but it would be nice to at least get to that spot where for sure. And I'm curious if you were to go back or how you live now, like if you're trying to get to the point where you have, let's just say, comfort, and abundance. And then, but also marrying this like kind of conscious perspective of how you want to make a living, your right livelihood. Is there anything that you would adjust? Because obviously if you have a massive bank account, you can then turn towards your passions and making a difference in all these different things. And as you kind of earn your way to that position and you're still trying to make ends meet, it can be a little bit more challenging. And I'm curious what kind of advice you'd have for people who are kind of in that position.
A lot. Yeah. So a lot. Now, first, let me just say there's a boomerang effect in this, which is part of what creates this whole, when I say prosperity, abundance, and living, all of these things, is when we decide that we're going to serve these higher objectives here of helping humanity at this challenging time on the earth, and we sort of take our little self out of it, put our bigger self in there where we are connected, to the world around us. There's a boomerang effect. It's law, So in sacred text, it says, give unto the kingdom, and then all things are given unto you. And that's talking about the boomerang effect thing, which has happened to me. So when I went to my wife almost 20 years ago, actually it was less than 20 years, or more than 20 years ago. And I said, hey, I may not ever have another paycheck in my life, but I'm called to this, and I hope this can work for both of us. And she said, hey, let's go, and we did. Started down the journey, then adopted 2 beautiful kids, and then I've just been guided and supported all along the way with what I'm calling a boomerang effect, where all things, including financial, you're guided to support your family and your work, and resources come in and things. Now, for listeners that don't have all that are more just paying the bills and so on, let me speak to them, because in this conscious living thing, it's huge, and I would not just keep living the conventional way. Let me give you an example. If we're blue collar or white collar, just making ends meet, really just paying the bills, where we're living conventionally with this whole, what Albert Einstein called illusion of separation, that we're all separate from each other, which doesn't honor, by the way, what current science is saying, in biology and physics, et cetera, that we're deeply connected. In quantum physics now, there's all kinds of the Nobel Prize for Physics in October last year was for 3 scientists that were working on what they call entanglement. And entanglement is where you have 2 different sides of the universe, even with no physical connection at all, that are deeply affecting each other. Okay, so we're talking clearly about an energetic, vibrational, spiritual universe. There's no physical connection at all. So this is now getting into things that we weren't taught, when we went through science in primary school, high school, college, where it was all just physical level science, which is all true, by the way, the physical level science. But there's this new science in quantum physics and so on that's saying everything is deeply interrelated and interconnected, the entire universe. And that changes everything. That starts to bring in these things, oneness of the universe and conscious living and things that we're going to be talking about here now. But so back to the blue collar and white collar person just barely getting by. Where we're living conventionally, what happens is we're living just to punch a for a paycheck. And so we're going to work to be on time, and then we're kind of watching the clock until 4:35 when we can head home, and then we head home, and then we're watching the clock to what time we need to go to bed, and in the morning, same thing, watching the clock. This is not a juicy way to live. Now, by contrast, where we start living into this whole, what science is affirming is true, where we understand this, the Rumi quote, it goes with this whole new science, which says that we're not just a drop in the ocean, we're the whole ocean in a drop. And the whole ocean in a drop, what that's saying is the properties of this one universal intelligence animating, pervading all of life, that level of omnipresence, omniscience, wisdom, omnipotence, power actually become at our fingertips. So there's all kinds of things that come into our daily living where we know this isn't the one life. This is a small chapter in an eternal life. Our lives completely change. Instead of watching the clock there to go to work, during work, to do things and come home, we're first of all, we wouldn't work in a place very long that wasn't really serving us and nurturing us. We're with people that are relational and not transactional. We'd be paying deep attention to those kinds of things. And we'd have an awareness of ourselves in terms of what we're eating, how we're sleeping, even what we wear that's supporting this whole conscious lifestyle. As we start living into that fully, as I do now, it's a complete difference. So sleep, let's take sleep as an example. I'm using time on the clock as one example. I used to go to sleep as just, it was a gap thing of, I got to go to sleep now because I got to get up at 6, and just go hit it out of the park again at 6. And I just wanted the clock to move as quickly as it could. Sleep didn't serve any purpose for me. It was just a gap between today and tomorrow. Now I'm like, wow, I enjoy my sleep. I go to bed early and I get up early, going to bed, sleeping a full night, being under the covers. I'm not filling a gap, just trying to get from here to there. I'm enjoying those moments during the dark of the night, just as I enjoy like right now and the fullness of the day. So even for somebody that's barely getting by, we can enjoy every moment where we're living fully into it, day and night, or we can just be in that whole punch in the clock, making the income that I need to make, getting home on time. And we've all lived that, where it's that mental, emotional roller coaster type day. Today's a good day, today's a bad day, up and down, versus more up in flow, which is what I'm describing, where we're more living. It's like drift diving. If you scuba dive or snorkel, is where you just have your arms out and you're just kind of in flow. And you still have challenges coming at you, as I do, but it's completely different in terms of how you see it, how you deal with it, your own vibrational energy level that is maintained at a steady state instead of going, way down with problems and things. So I would highly recommend it to every person, no matter their economic circumstance. It will change your life dramatically.
Yeah, I agree. The perspective around, your will here and your empowerment here. And when you read any of the spiritual texts, it tells you that you are infinitely powerful and God is within. Now, this doesn't mean everything is going to be easy. It just means that you have the capacity and capability to influence your reality. And so if there's something that you don't prefer and things are not the way that you want them to be, if you can get to a state of gratitude for everything that you have, and then say, you know what, these are the directions I'd like to go. I'd like to be in greater service. I'd like to have these types of people around. And I've watched it happen in small ways and big ways in lots of people's lives, from, individual jobs to career changes over a period of time. But it has to start with that initial thought, and then the action and prayer and follow-up happens. And whether it's a month or 6 months or a year, you could be living in a totally different reality. And that's coming back to your power and not just being a victim of the circumstances. But also, I think it's important to kind of like accept where you are and say, you know what, I'm grateful I have this job that can pay for my rent, and this is this where I am now. If you can get to that space of gratitude and then shift, I think that's incredibly empowering. And I'm curious, when you are speaking about like this consciousness evolution or conscious leadership, from your perspective, like, what does that mean? How do you see the possibilities for the individual and the collective moving forward, if we can kind of embody some of these ideas? So I know you work with and probably know Neil Donald Walsh, and he wrote Conversations with God, which are very fascinating books that I read years ago. And it doesn't involve this big picture, and it also invites the idea of working with God, which I think is incredibly powerful. And I think it's a more empowering way to live, to invite God into your life, rather than say, I'm just the creator, or I'm meaningless. Not, this is totally meaningless. Nothing is connected. Nothing matters. You can choose to live that way. But I feel like, inviting God in and looking for that power and experiencing that can really influence your life in a positive way.
Hugely, yeah. So part of this whole conscious living thing, with the oneness, which is talked about throughout the Conversations with God books, we are all one. It's present in all of the 9 books, and this goes back actually to Plato, and Hippocrates in 450 BCE said that we're all one. That there's no plural in consciousness 2,500 years ago, and then Albert Einstein, his famous quote of a human being is part of a whole called by us universe, but he experiences himself as kind of in a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness, that's a prison for us, and that restricts us to an affinity for a few. So this consciousness thing has been talked about, for a long time, 2,500 years, where it's saying that what I was bringing in here earlier, this what I'm calling universal consciousness that animates and permeates all of life. That so what that's saying is there actually is no separation at all. As this God, God or the divine, people that like science terms, the universe or cosmos, that they're actually present always. We just walk around in a state of our mind of separation, not believing they're present. But this is so once you live into this oneness, you really deeply understand the science, then it's just a whole new way of living on the earth. And incidentally, some of the scientists, I'll name Nassim Haramein, who was one of them that we work with, the Resonance Science Foundation. So he walks around like a preacher. He's a scientist. And he says, do you know that you are sovereign to the universe, that you are part of the universe? It's inseparable from you. So you should be walking straight and good posture and empowered. And man, you are a powerful being. The universe couldn't be without you. I mean, he sounds like a preacher. He's a scientist, exactly what the spiritual leaders say. So conscious leadership is where there's a process, an evolution in it. It starts with just ourselves, educating ourselves as to what this whole new science is and what these spiritual teachings are that go back 2,500 years, with all of what these notables have said too over time, David Bohm and Erwin Schrödinger, and there's just many, many of them that have made it their life's work to do research here. So our first step is just to do that research, really understand it. Now, for me, what happened from the research is then comes a day where you're of truth, where you hold up, okay, I'm either this or that, primarily. So, because I can't be schizophrenic, walking around half this way. So that day came for me in the 1990s. I'm either primarily the son of Linda and Joe, and I got one life living here, and then I'm gone, or I'm primarily, part of the one. Delivered here, I came from the non-physical realm. I wanted to embody. I came into this lifetime. My parents were sort of the airport terminal delivering me, to the earth. And I have all of the properties of the one, everlasting life, unlimited potential, and so on. So which one, Steve, are you? So I remember sitting in my townhouse with this, and I said, I'm the latter. I'm this one. I'm primarily the offspring of the one, as you are, as everybody is. And that was the day when it all began to shift, because that's the ground then I stood on from that day forward. And as you live into that, really understand it, live into it, and these are the next step after education, is embody and express. So become that. What is, how does that feel for you? What is that? Gratitude that you brought in is one of the elements, really being grateful for a lot of things. There are many, many dimensions to it. And as you embody it and express it, you come into the full power of it. I mentioned, omniscience, wisdom, omnipotence, power, where we're aligned with these things. Incredible things happen. I had these two companies, I was just a little guy, middle child, nothing special about me. And I tell the story in my book, A New Universal Dream. And then I create these two companies, bam, that grew to 75 million. And then I'm called away. And then with Neil, I start Humanities Team. And now, bam, we're the largest nonprofit in transformational education globally. And that's not me. That's not the little me. That's the big me, where I'm really feeling into and understanding this one of which I'm a part, and then aligning with some really key, I'll call it more noble objectives of health and well-being for people and the planet and the things that we're doing. And then, as you do that, you do come into more of a, call it full power in that. And then the last step is where, if you want to affect real change, then you need a fairly large team. One person can only do so much. So then that means you have to learn how to create a conscious culture where you're doing these things, you're creating a culture where you're doing these things together in the for-profit or nonprofit. There are many, I'll call it best practices in there. I'll give you just a couple. We don't need to go through all of them, but one is that it's always we and not me. So I am more the face of Humanities Team, but inside Humanities Team, I'm an equal one with many. I probably talk less than most of the leaders who are passionate, bright, devoted in Humanities Team. It's we, it's not me. Another one is the dream is right there held up in front of everybody. Our dream is to make conscious living pervasive worldwide by 2040 in 17 years. That's a big dream, and we believe it can happen. And wow, watch, lightning in a bottle when you get people together that believe in big dreams and are treating each other with respect and stuff. So those are two of the things. So building that conscious culture in your organization allows a bunch of people to come together and then really get reach and impact out in the world.
Yeah, I love all that. And I'm curious, when you're wanting to push forward like conscious living and the conscious dream, and you talk about the universal dream, what does that look like for you as far as the individual? If you're bringing someone in who maybe has never heard these ideas before, or maybe they're stuck in materialism, or they're like, this is kind of hogwash, like what are the changes you hope to make in their psyche? And then also from a worldview, how do you see things going? Because when I was younger, I thought, hey man, we'll get into like a world that looks like Atlantis, you know what I mean? Free energy, peace and all these different things. And in studying war and starvation, I realized that there are very large influences that really do not desire this type of world, and they can use ruses and they can use all different types of deceptions to get masses of people to engage in things that they think are good, but they aren't so good. So I'm curious, like I still have that dream, but I'm also aware of kind of like what we're up against. And I agree with we are all one and all these different types of things. I'm just curious how you see that playing out and what kind of education you look to empower people with from the individual scale, and then what that might look like if we could empower the children. And the last thing I'll just say is, like, if we could get one generation of amazing education for our youth, for our young people, it would lead to powerful changes. And when I look at that whole system, I really see a system of indoctrination that really limits in many ways and distorts and confuses children, which will inevitably lead to issues and also recalibration when we're trying to reintroduce these ideas that maybe seem foreign to them.
Yeah, so I'm with you on all of that. The current system of education, which is more regurgitation education, is terrible. What use do we have for learning all these equations and things that, unless we're going in a mechanical direction, and most don't, as opposed to learning reading and problem solving and being creative and good communication skills. And most of us do need those skills when we're out in the world. So education has really got a long, long way to go from where it is now. So, it's a big question, Matt, that you asked, but a couple things here. One is we have to clear our limiting beliefs. Okay, so one of the things that we share now in Humanities Team, and it's central to my book, A New Universal Dream, is that we have all of these limiting beliefs that get in our way, that so that we're just going to be living this one life, and go to bones and dust and stuff. So we compare that to like the Galileo moment is what we will often surface. The Galileo moment is like in the early 1600s. This guy Galileo surfaced. Everybody remembers him from science or history class. At that time, the church and the whole world believed that the earth was the center of the universe, and that the sun and the universe was revolving around the earth, right? And then Galileo surfaced, who he had built his telescope, and he said, that's not reality. It doesn't work that way. We're actually, the earth is actually in a solar system, right? So and there are planets, and we're revolving around the sun, and our solar system is at the edge of the universe, not in the center. So, and that was a huge deal. To us might like, well, is that going to really change our life? Well, let me tell you, in the early 1600s, where this was the whole model, is the earth was the center of the entire universe. It was the church, which was the big, powerful institution then, was like, well, this guy's going to die. Unfortunately, a lot of people were getting killed at that time. And he recanted. He had to recant his research and say it wasn't true. But it was already out in the world, what he shared, and other people with telescopes observed it was true. And so his research actually changed the whole world. The world we live in today is different because of Galileo, one man who was under house arrest his whole life. He was almost killed, house arrest to the end of his life. Now, likewise, today, we grew up with these limiting beliefs of just the physical science, a body, bones and dust, 6 feet under. It's all true. That physical science is true, but it's way limited. There's so much more. That it's an energetic, vibrational, spiritual universe that we live in. And that's actually what's important, because the body is, what we learn is there's a cycle between non-physical and physical, and we will embody many, many more times on particular missions that we have in lifetimes. So no longer is it one guy, Galileo, that has to put up his hand and say, I'm sorry, that's not the way it really is. Now it's all of us, where we understand the science, we study the science that I share. We've got lots of free programs on the Humanities Team site. If you go to humanitiesteam.org with a Y, at the top it has programs, and pull down the free programs section, you'll see all these science programs that are free. So go through a few of them if you don't follow this science that I'm speaking of, and you'll get it, that we're much more than just physical bodies. And that's going to be a huge adjustment to your life, where you start living into this spiritual being, energetic being, vibrational being, where we're really working to keep our vibration level high. So that's one thing that is really important here as we want to live into this whole conscious living thing. There's a lot more. As a spiritual being, then having practices throughout the day that help us stay in this place of connection to and communing with the divine. It's really crucial. So, and for me, it's not just beginning of the day and end of the day where I'm intentional and also metaphysical, but also bringing in, I work with the near-death experience people, and I work with the mediums that are connecting you with the afterlife. So, and I've been around them long enough. I've learned the process. I connect with my own dad who passed, and my sister who passed a long time ago, and my grandmother, and so on. It's actually not that hard to do. And then also to angels and guides that are here that it can help you as you're challenged with figure things out. I call it autonomous living. Everybody talks about autonomous driving. There's autonomous living where, there's so much in the non-physical realm that can guide you and support you, where you're going inside to this interior place of meditation, of stillness, of mindfulness that can guide you out in the world. So these are some of the things: clearing limiting beliefs, creating a practice so that we live consciously. These are a few of the things that we can do to just propel ourselves on this whole conscious journey. I will tell you, once you do these things, you'll never turn around and stop doing them. Again, I've done all the stuff that everybody says you want. You want to fly the private jet thing. I've done that stuff, and I will tell you, this is really much more delicious. There's much more abundance and prosperity and deliciousness in this stuff of which I speak than anything that's out there in that material world.
Yeah, I love all that. And in your book, you talk a little bit about living in service. And I think I saw something about just getting in touch with the divine. I don't know if that's what the chapter is, but what does that look like for you to increase your spiritual connection and, guidance to know that you're on the right path, that you're being of service? I love the idea in Buddhism where they talk about right livelihood. I think that's so important, and I think that will lead to more fulfillment. And then I'm just curious about living in service. They're all kind of synonyms. And how would you help orient a person that, has a family, they have responsibilities, they want to make a difference, and you're really engaging in the mystery? If you've got all the finances taken care of, that's one way. But it can be challenging. Like for my own story, it was cars. I can make a lot of money in cars. I have friends that work in car dealerships. There's a lot of opportunity there. I do enjoy cars, but that lifestyle and how much effort and time it would take, I'd have to work all my time with just selling cars, which isn't really aligned to who I am and what I want to do. And the monetary gain as I would go up that ladder would be pretty significant. So I kind of have to choose one over the other. And I'm just curious how you educate in that or frame that.
Yeah, and I want to make sure, Matt, educate or frame in just choosing, serving. So, all right, so the three premises of the book here, A New Universal Dream. And it's, by the way, you can go to anewuniversaldream.com, and the first 4 chapters are opened up, and we're giving my Conscious Leadership Masterclass away, a $299 masterclass there too, where you enter your receipt number where you buy the book. But so there are 3 premises in the book. One, this that I've brought in a couple of times, there's a universal consciousness animating and pervading all of life. 2, that we're designed as part of that one presence, which it actually, that would go with it, right? If there's only one consciousness animating and pervading all of life, and we're here in the universe, then we're obviously designed as an integral part of that one. So all physical and non-physical life is designed to be part of that one. That's why when I bring in, private jets and yachts and people that have all this money, and they're living into that money, all of the yacht life and with partners, multiple partners and things, and expensive wines. And you've heard the stories, you've probably read about it. They're like, why am I not happy? I mean, I've got all the toys. Why am I not happy? Because you know why? Because we're not designed that way. We're designed actually to be a part of the one. That brings us then to this third premise, which you bring in. And it's that the more we give of ourselves, the better we feel. That goes with the first 2, right? So the service, and in the book, you might remember, Matt, the part where I talk about a guy, Ken Behring, a billionaire. I got to know him because he has a wheelchair foundation. And he tells a story the story of his life is this guy hit all the jackpots. He even owned an NFL football team. He owned the Seattle Seahawks, for gosh sakes, billions of dollars. He had a car collection of 150. And so he created a museum for all of his cars, and had the 30,000 square foot mansion, and with all the most expensive wines. I mean, a 737 was his private plane. I got to fly it with his team to China to do a philanthropic project. So, and what Ken said is he said, my God, I didn't find happiness until 80. He died at 92. And he said, at 80, I started my wheelchair foundation, and people don't have mobility, that don't have a wheelchair, especially in the third world where you can't even really rent these things. And not only that, but family members would carry them around, right? So their whole day was taken up too by that, because there was a lack of mobility that helped carry this person around. So you give one wheelchair and bam, the person has mobility. Family members can do other things because they now have mobility. And so he was so just taken aback by this. He flew around the world. His last 12 years of his life, gave away a wheelchair foundation, gave away wheelchairs everywhere. So, and he said, I finally found it. So here you go. Now, we're not kin bearing, we're not billionaires like that, but I'm going back to remember the story I brought in here of the blue collar and white collar just barely getting by. It's the same thing of where we live into just this whole oneness thing. We find with that, we listen to that still small voice. That's our soul. We all have it. We listen to that still small voice that's guiding us. We're all guided to something. You, Matt, were guided to this great podcast. I was guided to create Humanities Team. Everybody listening is guided to their own station in life. And where we go to that station in life and we really give to it, and it's supporting our family and communities and the world, wow, amazing things happen. It's not what people, too often people will come up to me and say, oh, I've kind of tried this, but I'm afraid that I'll lose my style of living. I want to keep making the income and so on. This is where people don't get it right, because my experience and what I've observed is just the opposite. The more we come in and give and serve, which is what your question was about, actually, the more this boomerang effect, the more we'll be led into beautiful things, including income sources. Podcasts can go up into the stars with this, where people really feel the energy of this person is here, for real reasons, to create health and well-being, alchemy, healing, I can't, the only thing I can say to people is, if this sounds like pie in the sky, just try it. Follow that still small voice, really follow it all the way. Even when everybody's telling you you're crazy, especially then. In my book, I tell that story where, there were several times, at least 4 in my life, where I said, I'm going to go do this. My family and my coworkers, everybody said, you've lost your mind. Are you kidding? Don't do that. But I had that strong feeling, do it. And so I did. I pushed through. Another reason I wrote the book, to just try and help kind of get people's legs strong, because sometimes that still small voice will lead us like that, and to a really beautiful place if we follow it. But we do need to follow it even when the world is telling us something different.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that's such an important idea to mention, that almost no one's going to support you. You know what I mean? When you have this big dream, I actually had a new client reach out and has this amazing dream, right? And we were talking on the phone, and her dream is incredible. Like, I love it. It's massive and it resonated. She told me, and it gave me chills. You know what I mean? I don't want to share it here in the podcast, but it's so beautiful and it's so aligned with who she is. She's telling me that the second she told any of her friends, right, it's just like they poo-poo all over it, right? And it's because it doesn't come from them. They can't see how it's going to work. And they're also, from in their defense, they're looking out for you because they want you to be safe and secure. But also unconsciously, they don't want you following your dreams and breaking from the mold, because if they witness you do it, that means that they can do it, and they'll recognize whatever that small voice is, whatever their intuition is guiding them to do. That's it in there. They're constantly burying it down with their, fears and their limitations and their doubts. So when you, say, what, this is coming from me, this is the thing I'm inspired to do, and you go ahead and do it, they're like, oh my goodness, like it is possible. Oh my, and what bravery and courage it takes to do that. So I commend anyone who is even participating and engaging with that inner voice. And I just invite them to see what else you can do. And you might not quit your job right away, but just engage with it a little bit. And you might not quit your job ever. That's okay. However, when you engage with it more and more, you recognize that it's leading you and pulling you in a direction that is inspiring, that is for you. And I feel like it's that co-creation with God or the divine, or however you want to call it, because each person's inner voice and their calling is unique to them. No one else is going to get the same message. And that's why it's your leap of faith. You know what I mean? People aren't going to have that same leap of faith if that message isn't for them. It's got to really come from deep inside. And as you practice and engage and take action, you'll build your faith, right? Because it really is faith over fear. It's unsecure, right? You had, I don't know how much money you're saying before, millions and millions, and you got the, how am I going to pay for the jet? And how am I going to pay? How am I going to pay for this? Whatever friggin' rich guy problems you had. But still, when you have it all, you'd like, you know what? I'd like to keep this, and I know how to do it. So why not? You know what I mean? Continue to accelerate and grow in the way that I know how and that I've done. You're like, you know what? Oh crap. I got to let all that go, and I'm going to go over here. And there's no security, no safety net, and no guarantee to do that. And so all of us have to have that leap of faith. And so if we can start with little steps, over time, we're going to have the courage and the faith to take bigger steps. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that rant.
Yeah, boy, you're so right on. Yeah, take little steps. This is Gandhi's thing, as a little step is enough for me. And then he went all the way from this guy, that Oxford degree, law, and then to who he became. It changed the whole world. That was his whole saying, is one step is enough for me. And that makes it more doable, where we break it down into little steps. Don't try and just jump into the deep end. Just walk, a foot in the water, another foot in the water. Just start walking into it. Before long, you turn around 5 years in, 10 years in, it's like, wow, I come a long way. So now, two things here as we're doing what you suggest, which is beautiful, Matt. And for me, one is there's something I work, in transformational education. So I work with near-death experienced people all the time. I work with mediums all the time that are lifting the veil, with connections to the afterlife. So, and the scientists all the time. So one of the things that they all share is that there's something called a life review. I'm guessing most of your listeners have heard this. It's not the first time they've heard it. Okay. After your life is over, your physical life, you go through a life review. The life review is not a recording. It's actually right there in the moment in time throughout your life, these important moments in time. And what it is it's like you, Matt, where I'm seeing what you're feeling and thinking as you were with me. It's not what I'm saying or being, it's the people that were around me, what they were thinking and feeling as they were around me throughout my life. That's the whole life review. It follows you from early in life to late in life. And then at the end, you're asked, is there anything from this experience that might inform you in this next lifetime that you choose? And usually there are. And as you might imagine, this is going to be, maybe I'm going to be a little more truthful, a little more loving, I'll hear a little bit, listen a little better, right? A little more patient, a little more kind. These are the things one naturally is going to want to do from that. So as I consider that, why wait till the end of my life and go through that? Know that that's what life is about and what's going to happen at the end. So I'm going to be very cognizant of that throughout my life. The other really important thing is, again, I think everybody in today's world looks out at these challenges, extreme weather that is getting worse, and it's getting worse by the year. War like Ukraine that could turn into something really awful. The polarity here, polarity between rich and poor, polarity between right and left, where it's just where we're not in a state of oneness at all. We're actually pushing against, judging, this other group. So I look at these things. This is what gets me up for these programs I do. Yours is like is easy. Some I will be the middle of the night, 1 to 3 in the morning. It's a big program. I got to get up. So how do I come on full of energy, just ready to go? I think about this world that is challenged, and I say, wow, now if I can come in, if people are listening to this program, and I can come in and just speak powerfully to conscious living, which is a remedy, it heals all of this stuff. We can't possibly create a world like this when we are living consciously. If I can, even if there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people listening, and maybe their life perspective changes because of what I said, wow, that's going to light me up. So that's the thing for me as I come on to your program and programs like this is the moment, because 10 years from now, I'll tell you what, I am not going to look back and say, Steve, why didn't you come in with more passion, more wisdom? Why didn't you share more that could have maybe pushed this line that we're journeying in a slightly different direction toward more a sustainable and flourishing planet? Because I know we can enjoy a planet like that, but we all have to become involved. We all have to stretch into this conscious living thing. And that's the key thing I'm devoting my life to. And I think a lot of people would say, wow, if we could really, really do it, if we could really live into a different kind of world and I could make a difference, I think a lot of people will put their hand up and say, I'm in, and I think that's my desire here and hope with listeners here, that there's some number that say, man, I'm already in, but now I'm really, and I'm going to stretch even further. We're going to do this.
Yeah, I love that. And, when I look out in the world's issues, my original inquiry as a kid was, why do we have war and starvation? And learned about some of the global agendas, players, and influences that may not have everyone's best interest at heart. They may have, money at heart, and that's okay. And over time, it can be a little bit disheartening. And as I've gotten older, even what I've realized is, even if it all goes to total crap and it's scary and bad, if I can find that one thing, that one solution, that one thing that I want to make better, and I can commit to that, I feel better. I'm not lost in the muck of the doom and gloom of all the challenges. It's only my responsibility to do what I can do, and to do that to the best of my ability. And that's between myself, my inner voice, and the creator. And to use prayer and guidance and things like that, just be like guided to truth, guided to what I can do of service, and to do meaningful work. And I love what you shared about the energy of how you bring that forward. And one thing that's been helpful to me is living in day-tight compartments. And I can't. The guy who wrote the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's a brilliant book. He wrote a book about anxiety and worry too. And just I read that.
Dale Carnegie,
because I worried about worry. I was worried. And day-tight compartments and stoicism has been really helpful. It's like, you know what? I'm going to focus my energy intent on what I can do, and the bigger picture has never been up to me. Whatever the atrocity is, human trafficking is one that I worked on. It really bothered me. It's never been up to me. If I could push the button and stop it, I would. It is horrible, and it is very hard to understand and know. However, maybe I can do my Zen athlete or coach in my community, some young people on knowing martial arts to protect themselves. Just all these things. I can focus on that solution, and it feels better. And that is what's up to me. It's not all the infinite problems. And maybe that's why we are sent here. And that's why we have that inner calling. And if more of us can engage with that inner voice and what you would refer to, I believe, as conscious living, it's going to make it better for the individual. So it changes their world, their universe, their life experience. It also directly affects their family, their friends, and everyone they meet as they move forward. And that's that ripple effect that goes out there. And I can't remember the quantum entanglement. That's where I feel like I've heard interesting things of the 144,000, you know what I mean? Then we tip into Christ, all these kind of metaphysical things that may or may not be true. I like them. They sound nice, and I hope, and I'm hopeful. But what I know I can do is just my part to the best of my ability. And then that brings that power back when sometimes the dark agendas or things that are out there can be pretty disheartening.
Yeah, there's a lot out there that can be really disheartening. And, my gosh, the news accounts are getting worse and worse. That's why this is such a pregnant time. So we've mentioned conversations with God. I'll mention three real quick quotes. The very last book came out called Awaken the Species in 2017 in this whole Conversations with God series. The first one, quote from the book, is that we're one decision away from this world that we speak of, this sustainable and flourishing world. And for effect, just so that people don't miss it, it capitalized one decision away. And then it says, this is the perfect time for advancement. Did the same thing. It capitalized perfect time for advancement. Now, perfect time for advancement. Why? Well, I mean, that was an easy one for me. Again, you look out on the world, you brought in bad news and darkness and all of these things going on. And then coming out of COVID, where people are looking, for deeper meaning, a little purpose, sort of living into their deeper values. These are things that were post-COVID. Well, this is the perfect time, right? Where these are things that we're thinking about already. The younger generation is very disillusioned. The Generation Z and Alpha and Millennial I hear 25% are even disconnected from their parents because of old belief structures that they don't like. They look at today's world and say, hey, like they work at a job where it's a sales contest just for revenue, and they go, why would I want to chase that? They want something more than that. So we've got the youth, we've got people post-COVID, with these challenges, people reading the media, watching the media, where I think everybody is looking for something, some elixir, something healing, something that is going to take us more in a direction that feels better and that's better for the world. And I'll tell you, I've been out here, I've been in this 20 years with Humanities Team. Nobody has yet surfaced another thing that is like the thing that goes upstream and becomes the remedy for all these individual and collective issues out in the world. It's healing this illusion of separation that Albert Einstein talked about 75 years ago. That's this prison for us, where we just take the time to heal that illusion of separation and start really seeing the oneness that's here, and that then makes everything sacred. Everybody listening is part of that one, is sacred on its sacred journey of evolution. So that's what I hope and recommend. It's my passion. It's why I just jump into as many really fine podcasts like this as I can.
That's amazing. I love that. And I love the idea that everything is sacred. And I love one of the teachings that I got from my Native American teachers. It's just, they say all my relations, like everything is living, everything is alive. You know what I mean? And the 7-generation thinking, you know what I mean? What's life going to be like 7 generations from now, So all these are really beautiful concepts. And it's an invitation for us to self-reflect, to realize and recognize that we are a part of something greater. And then it's just up to us to do our small part. But when all of us engage with that, it makes it better for everybody. And I feel like we've gotten so off track because we have been really conditioned in our society to limit that inner voice, to limit, I forget what you called it, that little voice within. If we can re-engage with that, I think we'll be all better. We'll all be better for it, because that's the thing that we were meant to do. And often the thing that we're doing for society is for materialism, to get by, to make ends meet. And we might not be thinking if it's benefiting someone else or not. We're thinking about how to make ends meet. And the people who engage in this inner voice vision, 100% of the time, it's always of service to humanity. It's never something harmful. Not one time ever is it ever something that is to harm people. So that should just show you, if you have that inner voice, that inner calling, that it's needed in the world, and that it's available for you. And it's the thing that's calling you to do, because that's what God would want for you, is to do the thing that you were made to do. And if it feels like that's your thing, then it's your thing. And the challenge is, how do you make a living and do all those different, take care of your responsibilities? But if you engage with the path, you'll figure it out. It's you get an insurance job, if your insurance is fine, but I'm just mean like it's secure. It's a 9 to 5, you get the paycheck, that's available. This path is not as certain as that. However, when you engage, you're going to see how it unfolds in a very beautiful way, in a very fulfilling way. And when you do that life review, there's books out there that show the biggest life regrets, and it's like not following that dream, not following the inner voice is one of them. You know what I mean? They don't do it, and they're like, man, I really wish that I at least gave it a shot, that I tried. And so it's just something to consider as you listen to this. So I don't know if you want to comment on that.
Yeah. So a few things, even, where you're selling insurance, or you're a house cleaner or a nurse or something, part of this conscious living thing is there's no such thing, this term transactional, there's actually no such thing as transactional anymore. It's a deleted word, because you would never do it anymore. Which I did, by the way, so, I mean, if we go back, I tell that story in my 50-year journey, where I was very transactional. I tell some horrible stories on myself of, oh my God, but not anymore. As you live into this, it's relational, it's not transactional. So whatever you're doing, you're really giving some heart to it. You're giving some loving presence to it. And that then changes the whole thing that you're doing. We created an initiative a year ago in Humanities Team called Changing Humanity's Future. So, and if you go to changinghumanitiesfuture.com, you'll see this whole page. We created it with Neil Donald Walsh, the Conversations with God Foundation, and then all of these scientists and Michael Bernard Beckwith, many of these leaders joined us. Now, on that page, everything's free there. There's one section's called Confirmations of a Conscious Reality. And if you click on it, it's got all these quotes back from, I mentioned Hippocrates and Plato, back from there forward, all of these quotes that are confirmations, of this whole oneness or conscious reality. You can read all of that, and it'll give you a lot to consider. So then there's also a link in there to, it says action steps. When you click on that, there are all of these action steps that allow us to live into this whole conscious living thing in a bigger way. So the first one is what Matt and I've talked about here, which is to listen to and follow that still small voice within, not the worldly noise, but the still small voice. You'll see then others, there are many, many other steps in there. Some of them just come from our scientist friends, and some come from the Conversations with God book text, but they're things that help us to deepen our way of living consciously. You'll see at the top of this page that we're saying it's urgent now. We're actually trying to get a lot of media attention to it, because with extreme weather and so on, we're saying, hey, why is there not a global conversation right now about conscious living as the thing, the remedy, to all of these individual and collective problems? So we're in the process of drawing the media in so we can have that conversation and bring in our scientist friends and bring you in, and invite you when you're in conversations on your front porch or back porch, and some of those conversations go in the direction of, wow, this weather seems to be getting worse, and Ukraine, and this sort of downward spiral conversation. You can be the one to put up your hand and say, yeah, all that's true, but you know what? We're like well on our way to a whole different way of living on the planet. We could call it a lot of things. That Humanities Team calls it living consciously, and many of us are living that way already. And so just be that spokesperson, that embodiment, that expression of this. And that's how this will spread. So big invitation to everybody here. Just go to the page, changinghumanitiesfuture.com, and avail yourself of these free resources. And then if you like the idea, if it feels right to you, jump in, and just be an apostle with all of us out there in the world to help create this whole new way of living on the planet.
I love that. Well, I think we all need to be solutions based. There's a lot of opportunity to upgrade a lot of different areas in life. So thank you so much for just your mission and your intention and everything that you're doing. Is there anything in this show that you wish that we had talked about, or you want to leave the listeners with before we close the show?
Yeah, so I'll give you just some sites you can go to. So a newuniversaldream.com is the site for the book, where you get the first 4 chapters, and I give away my masterclass. So you just enter your receipt number. So that is worth checking out. And my 50-year true story, where I'm sharing all of the wisdom and lessons that I learned from a young man that really didn't know much to who I am today, where, with I'll call it God at my side, even there's no separation. So it wasn't really at my side, but more within, of just this journey, and how I learned and grew into the person I've become with my partners and Humanities Team. So that's one website. The other, humanitiesteam.org. And again, free programs there, the Global Oneness Summit that's free, broadcasts that we do that are free, lots of things there. We're a nonprofit 501c3. We even give away our half of our subscriptions to our streaming platform, because we have a 1-for-1 like Tom's Shoes. So somebody buys the paid subscription, boom, let's give one away to somebody somewhere in the world that can't afford it. So that's humanitiesteam.org, and then humanitiesstream.net with a Y, humanitiesstream.net. That's the streaming platform. You'll see all these master classes and all these scientists and spiritual leaders and Ken Wilber, philosophers, embodied practices, all of this stuff, hundreds of master classes where you can learn about that streaming platform. And we're trying to get that into every home out in the world, so that people, the things that Matt and I are talking about, it just becomes familiar. And once we walk through that door and start living this way, I've never seen anybody turn around and walk back out. Life is too delicious, to turn around and walk back out. So check those out.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate you and your work and your missions. And I invite people to check out the websites, check out the book if you want to learn more. And just thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Been a blast.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys, for watching. See you in the next one.